fresh out of the oven this morning is this 100% whole grain Einkorn sourdough loaf, and it smells so delicious. And today I wanted to get started on another one and thought I would take you along with me to share with you my entire process. Now there's a lot to be said about einkorn, especially if you've never heard of this ancient grain, but I'm actually going to wait until the end of the video to get into all of that because I want to get right in and share with you how I make my whole grain einkorn sourdough bread. Now for me personally, I think einkorn is the absolute most delicious grain out there. It has like this nutty, buttery flavor that is just so good. And I don't think it's very well known because it is different to cook with. It can be a little challenging to learn the nature of einkorn. It absorbs water differently. It forms less of a glutinous structure, so it doesn't really stretch and knead like other breads. But if you can just like reframe your mind about what every grain should behave like and bake like, you can really have fun exploring the world of einkorn, especially whole grain einkorn, which is incredibly nutritious and delicious. So anyway, let's save all the specifics about einkorn for later and get right into making another loaf of sourdough einkorn bread. The first thing you need is a very active starter to get started with your sourdough bread. So early in the morning, well, this is my schedule anyway, you can adapt it to your daily needs, but early in the morning, I like to feed my starter, so like 6 or 7 a.m. That way it's getting nice and bubbly, and by afternoon, I'm ready to bake. But I keep feeding my starter pretty simple. I basically throw in the flour and the water that I believe will double the amount of starter I have. It's important to at least give it equal to or double to keep a very active starter. So I just add that flour and filtered water. You just need to make sure it's not chlorinated and mix it up till it's like a thick pancake batter. If I ever get too much developed, I'll just make, sourdough pancakes or something that uses up a lot of discard. Now my starter is this golden yellow color because I like to feed my starter with all-purpose einkorn. I feel like it does the best with that. Okay, so then I love to freshly mill my einkorn berries. When you freshly mill your flour before you bake, you're getting like max amount of nutrients because grain actually oxidizes really quickly after it's milled. And so you want this to be as nutritious as possible. So if you can mill it right before you start to bake, it tastes the best. It is so fresh and delicious, and you're going to get the most nutrients available from it. You'll see here I'm using a countertop mill. It's the Nutrimill brand. Love it. I've had it for about 8 years and it works amazing. Look at all this beautiful, freshly ground einkorn. I get my einkorn berries from Azure Standard. I always buy my grains organic. I think that's very important so that we don't have any harmful chemicals in our flour. Okay, now I'm ready to make the dough. It's about 1 or 2 in the afternoon. I feel like my starter is at its peak point or close to. And so I'm adding the freshly milled flour and the salt, and I'm going to incorporate them together so that they're incorporated very well. And I like to use these sourdough hooks. They work really great. So then I add just like lukewarm water that I get from my Berkey filter, and I add that to the flour and the salt. And you'll see here my starter, it's nice and bubbly and active. And then that's the final ingredient that I add. And I'm using a scale, I'm weighing everything. This way it gets you more consistent results. Now, if you've done sourdough bread before, you know that usually you're just adding the flour and the water and letting them autolyze, which means that the flour just absorbs all the water. And then later on, you add your salt and your starter. Einkorn, like I mentioned, is just unique, and it's actually so much simpler to make because of its uniqueness. You just don't have to fuss about it. So it really doesn't make much of a difference if you add all the ingredients together right at the beginning and then let it all absorb. And you'll see here, it's quite a tacky dough. It's very sticky. You just mix it this first time until it all feels like it's incorporated. Einkorn, you really don't want to overmix. And so I like to use a rubber scraper and just scrape down the sides. You'll see here I actually switched bowls. I was wondering why it felt so clumsy in that glass bowl. I wanted a glass bowl so you could see it really well, and then quickly realized I needed my more curved porcelain bowls. They seem to work a little bit better. But this is the second time I'm mixing it, and you can see it's a little less tacky than it was initially. So normal sourdough bread, you're stretching and folding at least 6 times. With einkorn, you actually can do damage to the very weak gluten structure, and this is what makes it so easy to make. You actually don't want to overmix it, you don't want to stretch and fold it, you don't want to over knead it so that you don't damage that delicate gluten structure. The main goal is to get all the ingredients incorporated until your dough is a bit more smooth to the surface. And this only takes about 2 or 3 times. And then you're ready to let it bulk rise. I like to do this in my oven with the light on during the winter months because it's pretty cold in the house. So I find that a more consistent environment. So my daily schedule is after I've mixed up that dough around 2 or 3, it's late in the evening, maybe 9 or 10 o'clock, and then I'm getting it ready to be put into the bowl or the banneton and then proof in the fridge overnight. This gives it that long fermentation stage, which makes it taste yummy and makes it really good for your gut. So again, you just do not want to overwork your einkorn. So I just plop it out of the bowl into a floured surface. I prepared my little bowl. I lost the banneton covers for my banneton baskets. So I use the linen side of my bowl covers that I made. I'll leave a link in the description below for that tutorial if you want to make some yourself. I use those to cover and inside the bowl. I also just use tea towels sometimes, floured tea towels inside of a bowl, and that works too. But you're seeing here, I'm just gently working with this einkorn, pulling it out flat, carefully, rolling it up like you would like cinnamon rolls, and then rolling it into itself again until I get a nice round shape. You just want to be gentle, work it as little as needed to kind of seal in the ends and form it into the shape that you want. It really is quick and simple to work with. It helps to have flour. Any kind of flour works because it is a stickier dough, or keep your hands and surface wet. That's also one thing that you can do to work with einkorn. Put it in the bowl, and then you're going to cover it. You can use a grocery bag to cover it, saran wrap, press and seal. Again, I just utilize my handy bowl covers so that I don't have to use so much plastic in my home, and I can reuse these easy enough. And I have to just say, the whole sensory experience working with einkorn, the smell, the soft texture, everything is just delightful. I think you'll love it. Next day here in the morning, I've preheated my Dutch oven in the oven at 500 degrees. You want it hot, and you want the Dutch oven hot with it as well. And then you turn your dough out on parchment paper. You're actually seeing here I'm working with a linen tea towel. This is a different loaf that I filmed for you, but same concept. Just get it out onto some parchment paper. Be really gentle with it. This stage is a little tricky because it can deflate pretty easily and yield like a flatter round loaf, but it's okay if it does that a little bit. It still tastes delicious and it's still beautiful. And you can flour the top of the dough if you want to get more of a detailed, intricate design. But I find with einkorn, I like 2 deep scores. It helps it rise a little bit better, especially where it's so delicate. And then you get it in the hot Dutch oven as quickly as possible. And I actually like to add a couple of ice cubes behind the parchment paper, and that creates some steam, which is another trick to help get it to rise up a little bit better. And so you cook it at 500 for 25 minutes, take off the lid, lower the temperature to 425, and cook it for another 15 minutes. Now, I also wanted to share with you this rectangular Dutch oven that I've been using. It actually helps your einkorn dough rise up because it's kind of forced to because it's in there so tight. So if you're worried about a deflated round loaf, use a rectangular Dutch oven, and it gives you more of a traditional bread slice size. Works great for sandwiches, but any way you do it, these loaves are beautiful, delicious, and incredibly nutritious. let's talk a little bit more about einkorn and its unique properties. Now, as you can see by my loaves, they're not picture perfect. It's really hard to get the perfect loaf. If you know how to do that, let me know, but it is just trickier to work with than other wheats. But honestly, I don't fuss about that because by the time you slice into it and taste it, it's out of this world delicious. So I just don't even worry about that and just really enjoy the process of cooking with einkorn and learning about it. So let me share some of the facts that I know about einkorn, and then maybe that will get you inspired to go and learn even more. So einkorn is actually called the original wheat. I don't know if that means it's like the very first wheat that ever existed. I don't know if we have that information, but it's ancient, it's old. I think I heard stories once of them finding it, in pyramids and whatnot, but regardless, it is old. And one of the coolest things about it is completely unhybridized, which means it hasn't been genetically messed with at all. It is like in its original form. The genetic testing of einkorn has shown that it just simply has the simplest genetics out there in the wheat family, which is pretty cool. And this is what makes it one of the most easily digestible wheats out there. So a lot of people who can't handle gluten find that they can handle einkorn just fine. I think it's even better in its freshly milled whole form. You can buy all-purpose einkorn. That's actually how I feed my sourdough starter. I find that it does better with the all-purpose. Makes amazing discard pancakes. So that's kind of our treat. But as far as like baking bread, I try to use the freshly milled whole grain flours and buy them in the wheat berry form, and then just mill them at home because that makes it like top-notch, most nutritious wheat that we can get. And when you combine it with fermentation or use a sourdough starter, I feel like it's the best we can do for bread. Freshly milled einkorn, baked at home with simple ingredients, and fermented by using a sourdough starter. I think that's just as good as it gets. And we don't see it a lot because, as you can see, it's not picture perfect. It's not what we've gotten used to seeing bread look like. And so it makes it a challenge to work with. And so a lot of people shy from it, but I hope this encourages you to just dig in and give it a try because it is so amazing, and it fills you up so much. I can be fueled for hours and plus, like most of the day, just by eating a toast in the morning because it is so filling and nutritious and fueling. Sometimes for dinners, we'll just do what we call fancy toast, and we'll make avocado spreads or like a nut spread, just like top off a piece of this einkorn bread and add other nutrients with it. Maybe add some fruit on top with peanut butter, drizzle with honey, and it makes a really simple, easy meal that is so filling and nutritious. And if you're kind of unfamiliar with what kind of nutrients freshly milled whole grains has, go look it up. It's really one of the most nutrient-dense foods on this earth. But we've been deceived by bread in the stores that has a lot of preservatives and all that good stuff ripped out of it. Clearly, I could talk your ear off about all of this, but something really cool about einkorn is that it has almost 2 to 4 times more of those nutrients than, say, our modern wheat, like hard white wheat or hard red wheat. So really cool that you can make this thing and it just has even more of the good stuff. And then as far as like cooking with it, I just want to say right now, if you're wanting to play around with recipes, try subbing it out, just remember that einkorn absorbs water differently. So in general, it needs either less moisture or less water in the recipe or more flour. So that's why you see this einkorn recipe that I'm sharing with you, which I will definitely keep in the description below. It has a lot of flour. It has more grams of flour than typical sourdough loaves. That's because you just need that. And then it doesn't form that gluten structure. So you could stretch and fold and knead all day long and it really wouldn't make much of a difference. So that's what makes it such an easy recipe to pull together, because it's just no fuss. You just get it mixed thoroughly, let it rise, let it do its thing, and then bake it. So as far as making sourdough artisan loaves, it's, I think, the easiest bread to make. But you just have to understand the proportions and get used to more of the tacky, sticky dough, have the right tools so that you can handle that, and then just let perfection go and enjoy the taste of this rustic bread. All right, friends, maybe I need to do like a whole podcast episode on this so I don't take any more of your time, but thank you so much for joining me today. I hope it was inspiring, and I hope you give baking with einkorn a try. All right, have a lovely day, and I will be back very soon to share more inspiration for the keeper of the home.